Hey, it's News from Heaven. Today we discuss doing evil freely seems to be a kind of freedom, but it's actually slavery. That's a direct quote, by the way. And it's got all the elements you'd want in a blockbuster. We've got evil. We're going to delve into the nature of what is it that sucks the goodness out of life. But also freedom. And isn't it when let's say you're saying, look, the world is absolute chaos and it's painful and it's crazy. Don't tell me there's God managing it. And then annoying people on the internet say, no, there is God. There is God. And the reason everything is chaotic is because of free will. Freedom, well, what is that? What are you talking about? Okay, and why is freedom so important, and how can you justify the condition of the world? Why? What is the nature of this freedom you're talking about? Okay, let's take a stab at it here. And as we find with all this stuff, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the state of what it is to be a conscious person. And particularly what I'm interested in finding out is from whence comes all of the inner conflict that is the source of all the outer conflict that comes through people who are dealing with the inner conflict. And how can we learn anything? Look at how beautiful that sun is. Can we learn anything here that lets us know that there is something above the clouds that does bring us the sense of peace and comfort that we feel like we should experience if it is a just universe or a good something that we're in? This is New Jerusalem. You can download it for free. Listen, I told you we're talking about freedom, and we're in the section that's about freedom itself, and we're going to start in number 141. All freedom is a function of love. Okay, that's a weird start. All freedom is a function of love, because what we love, we do with a sense of freedom. And this is, again, a classic case of old Swedenborg is going to give us a new definition. So if we're talking about freedom, when we think about freedom, generally I would say we think, I'm free if there's A and there's B here, and I'm here considering, I've got one eyebrow up, one eyebrow down. Which one do I want? Freedom is being able to, that looks about like me. Okay, freedom means I can go to either one, and that's the state of being free. And Swedenborg is saying it has to do with actually all freedom is a function of love. What a function of love means is that to do an act like go for B, you can't do that without wanting to do it. There's nothing you can do without wanting to do it at some level. Because you could say, yes, I can do something that I don't want to do. I really don't want to eat this broccoli, but I'll do it to show you that I can do something I don't want to do. No, the thing that's motivating us is, sure, we don't want to eat the broccoli, but we do want to prove the person wrong who said we can't do what we don't want to do. There's always, this is according to Swedenborg, an element, the will, without the will, you can't initiate motion. So you have to want to do something to be able to do it. And to actually be able to go and do good or evil things, you have to have the particular will to do what's good or the will to do what's evil. And freedom is the ability to go after those things. So he's saying that, therefore, all freedom is connected with our will, because whatever we love, we also will to do. And since our love and our will constitute our life, freedom too constitutes our life. This can show us what freedom is. Namely, that it's a reflection of our love and our will, and therefore our life. This is why anything we do freely seems to have come from ourselves. So it seems to be ours, seems to be what we are. Because if you think about, when do you really feel like you're not free? Let's say there's these two options, and there's a bunch of other ones. Think about all the things in life that you're not doing. There's option F over here, there's C, there's D, there's E over here. And let's say that you don't really have any desire at all for what F is. It's just not something that's on your radar. You don't care. If you're blocked from F, sure, you could get philosophically like, well, I should be allowed to do that, but you don't really care. You don't really feel like you're not free. If there's something, like I don't want to walk a tightrope. I don't want to learn how to do that. If I found out I couldn't, I just don't think it would really give me this sense of I'm not free. But if there's something I really want to do, if I really love B,
if B is something I really want, and then there's a block on that, that's when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm not free. Now we've got a problem. Because freedom, the point Swedenborg is trying to make is that freedom is actually a desire to do a particular thing. That only when we're acting, the essence of the free experience is when we're acting because we want to do something. That's when we really feel free. And that becomes ours. That's something that really feels like us. All right? Okay, we set that up. Doing evil freely. Okay, here we get into evil. Oh, hey, and you know what? See if you recognize this sentence. Doing evil freely seems to be a kind of freedom, but it is actually slavery. Since this freedom comes from our love for ourselves and our love for this world, and these loves come from hell. Okay, the drama has been upped significantly. In consciousness, there's two sourcing mechanisms. There's heaven and there's hell. And if we're here in the middle, again, I've got to draw us and I've got to do it well. Let's see. We're contemplating something, but we're happy because of something. It's either heaven's making us happy or hell is making us happy. We don't know at this point. And it may feel like great freedom is to go and do what we want to do. But let's break instead of into different letters or places we could go. Let's say that this is something good. This is something good. This is something good. This is something evil. This is something evil. This is something evil. And I know we can debate forever. Like, wait, is that really good or evil? What about the circumstances? Okay, that's why we won't label these as specific things. But acknowledging that there are things that are destructive to the health of an individual person or the health of a society, and things that are beneficial. Actually, it may seem like going to choose the right thing and going to choose the wrong thing are the same action in that they use the same resources. Your muscles need ATP and however else your body works, that needs to fire. But actually, the will level motivation to be able to do that has to come from somewhere. You can't manufacture that. So Swedenborg here is saying it seems like when we go, if we really want this evil here, we say this is a great thing and I've justified it and I'm just going after it. To actually be able to do that, you have to source that from somewhere in your will, and there's two general sources for anything evil. That's what Swedenborg describes as love of ourself. Am I going to write this whole thing? Love of self. And our evils are kind of getting in the way here, right? And then love of the world. And these two things you could break down to say love of self is love of dominion. Let's say this evil is in some way using somebody as disposable to get your ends. So to be able to take that action, you've got to have a source for your energy. And Swedenborg is saying that actually the source for the energy and the will to do it is coming out of hell. And from that is compulsory in getting us to go do that. This would be, love of the world would be more if we're looking to, deprive somebody in some sense of the material things they need in order to increase our material pleasure. That's what moves us in that direction. And the case is that while this might feel great, that we feel like I'm in freedom here because this feels like we're doing something we want to do and getting a pleasure reward for it, we're following marching orders, because these two loves are what hell instills in us. So we are here being driven by our need to commit these things, and as we do, we need to commit them more and more, and it ends up actually trapping us. It feels like the opposite of freedom once you get into it. In contrast, freely doing what's good is freedom itself, because it comes from a love for the Lord and a love for our neighbor, and these loves come from heaven. This freedom, too, stays with us after death and then becomes true freedom, because anyone who has this kind of freedom is like one of the family in heaven. So there are equal and opposite potentials here. So just like you have love of self and love of the world, here you have love of the Lord, LOL, and then love of the neighbor. And if you had to break these down, love of the Lord is the love of doing what's good. Because that, you can think about which one do I want to be led by? Do I want to be led by God, or do I want to be led by hell? Well, what's the difference? It's all just the same kind of entrapment, because, if you think about, we've got God, and let's say this is a pretty accurate depiction of God, and God is here. And then you think about us, and we're a person here, like a finite version of that. And it seems like, well, how could you possibly say that being led by heaven, by these two loves, is freedom, as opposed to being led by hell? Because isn't it just, you've got God, and whatever God wants, God tells you to do it, and then you do it. But that is thinking in space and time, and thinking of God as a finite thing, like we're a finite thing. And the way that I see that is, if we think about us as this little person here, we're kind of cute there, and we have a mood, and we have a disposition, and we have things we want in the moment. Let's say we watched some documentary, and that got us to think about a particular cause we want to do, and so we're telling other people, go do that. And then something shifts, we're hungry, so now we want to go get this food over here. We have a particular line of thinking in time and space. And so aren't you saying that we're just going to try to follow whatever God's mood is right then? And God is saying, well, right now, what I want to do is, even if it's something great, like I want to build this magnificent heaven or kingdom or something like that. I want to create this era for the human race. Okay, that's what I want. I just figured this out. And now I'm going to go and tap this person and say, you go do this. That seems like, right, you're just a puppet then. But God is not in time and space. Swedenborg says God sees all past and present as all past and future as the present. You can't boil God down to like a mood, and this is what God wants now, this is what God wanted previously, in any way that we can comprehend. What it is that God, you have to contemplate God as the essence of what God is. Like who really is God? And God is the love of everything good and true. So when you hear we're being motivated by love of the Lord, that means you're being led by the love of what's good. And love of the neighbor is the love of what's true. And those two things, because what's good and what's true, actually bring you health and happiness and freedom. It's a completely different thing than being led by hell, which hell is actually so limited that you really, in Swedenborg's case, he says there are like individual people in hell that are trying to get you to do particular things or get you into particular ruts. This is very constricted, and very much you are subject to the will of limited, individual, meaningless urges. Or so I've been told. This kind of freedom actually, we already read that, the family in heaven. That's what it takes to be in heaven, right? Is the love of the Lord and love of the neighbor. That's what heaven is. This is how the Lord expressed it. Anyone who commits a sin is a slave of sin. A slave does not abide in the house forever, but the Son does abide forever. If the Son makes you free, you will truly be free. Mystical sounding things, but that is a commentary on the nature of following what's evil and false versus following what's good and true. Because when you follow what's good and true, it has just built into the way that it operates. It is not continually progressive and addictive like evil is. Since everything good comes from the Lord and everything evil from hell, it follows that it is freedom to be led by the Lord and it's slavery to be led by hell. And you could say it's freedom to be led by the love of what is good and true, and it's slavery to be led by the love of what's evil and false. Yeah, just check out how does it do in your own life. I know the more that I'm going after the stuff that, according to Swedenborg's writings, is false, this would be, a lot of the people drama when I'm comparing myself to somebody, or I'm feeling antagonistic towards somebody, or I'm looking down on somebody. It's all false because of this. No, heaven is coming in and doing what's good. Hell is coming in and doing what's evil. And none of us is any better or worse than anyone else. It's God is doing what's good. And if we can metabolize that, then we can contribute to something useful. But then all these messages that come in about yourself, everything here that we're talking about, these head clouds, right? And how they come in and just absolutely fill you with false narratives. And everybody knows this, that if you start talking to somebody else about what you believe about your life, they'll say, well, how is that true? That's not it. We are constantly overrun by this stuff. Because what's false is limiting and it's entrapping. And if you really have God here having made life and made it by divine wisdom, it would have to be, as is said, that the truth sets you free. There's no way the design of the system, and that's the great promise, is that what's getting us down here is not reality. You always think, I'm just observing reality and that's why I'm miserable. But that actually reality is good. It's a false picture of it that makes us chronically unhappy. The purpose of having, so then, okay, we've established not so good to be led by evil and falsity, so good to be led by goodness and truth. And why, though, do we find ourselves just moving in between both of them so much? Why do we exist in this middle ground here where at one point it's coming in, you feel like, wow, I've really improved who I am and I'm thinking great and this stuff is clicking and it's making sense, and then the next minute you've snapped and you lost it and you're back at square one and you're dealing with pushing back this kind of stuff that's just so persistent. What's going on here? Why are we unable to just shut doors? And why is the human race not placed under more strict control so that it can't? The purpose of having the freedom to think what's evil and what is false, and even put them into practice to the extent that the laws did not prevent it, is that it gives us the ability to be reformed. So this is for us. Like, we are able to wrestle with what is good and what is evil because this is what allows us to be brought into heaven. What is good and what is true need to be planted in our love and our will if they are to become part of our life. Wow, we've changed gears here. And there is no way this can happen unless we have the freedom to contemplate both what is evil and false and what is good and true. Why freedom? Why does something have to happen in freedom? The best analogy I can draw is like a little bit disturbing, but I'm going to say it, which is like, think of force feeding, trying to force feed somebody. This actually does happen because I have a daughter now who used to be smaller and didn't want a certain kind of medicine when she wasn't feeling good, and so we had to like get it in this little dropper and sneak up and like try to get some in there, and she would spit it out and hated it, and it was terrible as a parent to have to do it. But if you could get some in there, then it did some good. But so much of it was lost in that battle. You barely get any of it in there. If somebody doesn't want to get fed something, they can't get fed it. Because even if you're saying, well, if you can just get it in there, sneak it in there somehow, then they metabolize it. But that's just because the body says, okay, well, once it's in, okay, I'll bring it in. If even the body itself was saying, I don't want to bring this into my system, you could never get somebody to eat something. Whereas if they want to, every system works together to prepare that food, to break it down to where it needs to be, to bring it in, to disseminate through the body. It has to be an act of will on their part. Same is true with us and goodness. And that spiritually, to eat something that's good has to be a voluntary act. Meaning, eat something, the correspondence to that is to take something that is out there and make it a part of who you are. Remember earlier we were talking about the part, it becomes something that's from us. To do that, you have to do that. Just like you have to choose to eat something. You have to do that on your own free will. So this, the only arena in which we can see and recognize something in the spiritual environment, like goodness, like by looking at what life is and how other people are and what it's like to choose good or evil against them, in that arena where there is freedom, where we can contemplate both, where we can be actually rewarded by joy from both, and to say, I want to do this good thing, that's putting that and us putting it into ourselves, which is we're the only person who's really allowed to do that. This freedom is given to each one of us by the Lord when we are contemplating something that is good and true. Then to the extent that we do not at the same time love what is evil and false, the Lord plants that goodness and truth in our love and our will, and therefore in our life, and in this way reforms us. So what are the steps? You can get this heavenly freedom by contemplating something good and true, and then to the extent that we do not at the same time love what's evil and false. So push this out, contemplate this, act on it. Then the Lord plants that in our will so that we're able to go act. And once we act on it, that's when we are reformed. That is the micro process you can repeat over and over to move into heaven. And indeed, we do throughout our lives. Anything that is planted within us while we're in a state of freedom becomes a permanent part of us. Anything, though, that is planted under coercion does not last because our will is not engaged. The will behind it is that of the person supplying the pressure. Because once that's removed, we'll snap back into the alignment we had. Only freely chosen stuff remains. This is also why worship in a state of freedom is pleasing to the Lord, but forced worship is not. And I think you could read that on a couple levels. Well, let's finish the sentence. Worship in freedom is worship that comes from love. Forced worship does not come from love. You could say worship like, okay, I am your Aunt somebody, and I'm saying you've got to go to church, and you say, I don't really want to, but I guess I will, and so I'm in there. That's one level. But if you take it a little bit deeper, to worship is to live the life that is asked by divine principles. So if we're going out and living the good life, but doing it because somebody else told us to, or because we want to avoid punishment, or any other, not because we really recognize through our rationality and our experience in life that this actually is the right thing to do. If we're doing something that we don't really think is the right thing to do, it's not going to stick with us, and it doesn't matter to God. God is not saying, I'm going to, let's tally up, did you do this stuff? How much stuff did you? It doesn't matter what we did. It matters what we're trying to do. It matters if we're trying to figure out what's right and true by our own measure, and trying to go after that, and trying to push away whatever we believe is not good and true. That's worship and freedom. And the more that we do that, the more that what is evil and false can't cling to us, and the more that this heavenly freedom, which is God coming in through the love of what's good and what's true that we're developing, and giving us the ability, the will, and the desire to do it, that happens. And that's good. And that's the news from heaven. Cool. So, does that make sense? Can you weigh that, please, in your rationality and freedom, and tell me how do we apply it to life? Leave us a comment. We love getting to read those and getting to hear this being processed. And how does it actually go out and do something good for life? The third part, the application and the action. If that doesn't click, then it ain't nothing. Then it's not going to reform anybody. It's not going to make the world a better place, and it's not going to make us happier and be able to make others happier. And that's the whole point. So check it out. Let me know. Like and subscribe. Appreciate it a lot. See ya.